we argue is that a degrowth society would actually benefit working class people, and um, there's there's no degrowth proponents who are uh, for limiting population in itself. That's not the point. The point is for um, what we argue for economy based on public abundance. So it's basically flipping the Malthusian logic of mainstream economics, which is about how to overcome scarcity, flipping that on its head and to say we can build an economy based on abundance for everyone rather than scarcity for everyone and abundance for those who have money.
Right, and I don't think you can really talk about Malthus without talking about British imperialism, can you?
Exactly. Yeah. He was a total product of his time, and his economic outlook was really developed to justify the British genocide and murder of peoples all around the world.
So I want to ask you a question about this buzzword that we all hear so much, democracy. Tell me about democracy, and specifically tell me how degrowth is democratic. How can degrowth be controlled in a democratic fashion, or is this just a pipe dream?
So I think something that a lot of people um, kind of miss about degrowth is that um, in our opinion, when we wrote the book, we said degrowth is the politicization um, of a society's material and energy use. So what we're arguing is essentially that how much stuff a society uses, that's something that should be a political thing. That's something that we should talk about and deliberate as a society. Um, if if our economy is driving the collapse of environmental systems, if it's hitting a hard wall against planetary boundaries, and if it's based on outsourcing, offshoring pollution on poorer countries and on poor communities, we have to talk about that. Um, so degrowth essentially is there's this whole sphere of how the economy works that's totally ignored, um, and we're trying to bring that into the political debate. And what that means is actually, if we're um, making it a part of our politics, that means we're trying to introduce it into the democratic process. We're trying to make it something that we as a society deliberate about.
It's also seems like a reflection of our values on the left. I kept encountering this idea as I read through the book that it's not just about the actual sort of degrowth of the material, of consumption and of our economic system and so forth, but degrowth is actually sort of a reflection of what I would think of as the core values of socialism, of anti capitalist ideology. So, can you talk about how it reflects our values on the left?
Yes, I think that's really the key here is, once you start thinking about, what do we want as a society, and once you start kind of moving away from this idea that economic growth is the primary thing that we want as a society, then it kind of blows open all kinds of possibilities. And you start having to deal with questions like, what do we actually want as a society? What are our values? Um, what can we prioritize? And so we have a slogan, which is less commodities, more relations. Um, and in French, it comes from French, moins de bien, plus de lien. It rhymes a bit better, but degrowth is basically about we could have a society that's based on meeting that's based on valuing the kind of labor that maintains our society. It values women's labor. It values childcare. It values care for the elderly. It values the kind of work that is required to take care of the ecosystems that we live in. Um, and right now, all of that is not valued in a society where we have an economy where um, the things that are valued are the things that exploit people, and those have the most value. And so we're trying to really just expand and enter and explode this conversation about what is valuable.
Indeed. I want to ask you something else before we head to the break, and this, I guess maybe I'm teasing a little bit the discussion we'll have after the break, but I want to talk about the different approaches to, I guess, what you might call the civilizational crisis that we're all facing, the ecological crisis, the cascading ecological crises. So there's kind of one view that the way to fix this is through a sort of a neoliberal kind of green growth idea. And this, of course, I mean, well, I'll let you lay that out. So can you talk about neoliberal green growth and also this sort of neo-fascist, neo-feudal eco-apartheid, right? And if you could contrast these two, I guess you could say, political paths in this context and the dangers of both of them.
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I think, though most listeners might not have heard those terms in exactly those words, but I think you'll see it when you recognize it. Is there's one option that we're presented with, which is basically as climate change wreaks havoc around the world, in different communities, in rural areas, in certain cities, as wildfires happen everywhere, as hurricanes become stronger and stronger. The answer is increasingly close the borders. We're going to close the borders and we're going to protect the wealthy that already have access to the greatest privileges, and we're going to um, basically prioritize a kind of war economy where where we um, make it make the priority of basically an economy that's based on exclusion and based on increasing extraction around the world for the benefit of the wealthy and of a certain minority class. And you can see that kind of proposal starting, that kind of idea starting to happen, in the United States with Trump. But then also Jair Bolsonaro was a really good example where it was basically about this kind of um, denial of climate change, but at the same time, a complete um, ramping up of the extraction and destruction of the Amazon, and a reliance on violent discourse. And then on the other hand, you have this other alternative that I think a lot of people will recognize is this future that's based on high tech innovation. It's the Silicon Valley dream, the Bill Gates dream, that all we have to do is just innovate our way out of this crisis. And the idea is that the people who are the wealthiest are the people who can get us out of here as well. So the more money you have, the greener you can be, and uh, because you're the most innovative, and and so it's this ideology called green growth, which is basically that the people at the very cutting edge of sustainability are the wealthiest, and we can solve the problems uh, with just scaling up certain technologies like capturing carbon or electric vehicles or and that is really like that's the basically the Joe Biden economy is just we're going to fund all these innovative technologies, all these green technologies, without actually confronting the kinds of contradictions that these economies rely on, that these technologies rely on.
Well, we have defined the enemies, that is, the green growth neoliberals and the eco apartheid fascists, and we can take a break because on the other side of the break, we're going to define the dividing lines on the left, the battle lines that have been drawn over these questions on the left. Those are, of course, the ones that we probably are going to be most encountering in our little left wing world. So let's take a quick break. I'm going to continue the conversation with Aaron Van Singen about degrowth here on Counterpunch Radio. Listen to the music. We'll be right back.
If the clock strikes midnight, then what becomes of our demonstrations? To which fate have these gatherings fell? Which walls echo all the chants we yelled into faces on the coins we tossed into the wishing well? Drinking water on which we subsist, mixing into rivers that did not exist. Yesterday when all the warning signs were there but sorely missed. What's it worth, all the money we made, floating idly in a newborn lake, far above financial centers? Cities sink like market rates, glass barely bends before it cracks, embedded down into our path, paved in the crimson of our tracks, without the chance of turning back. Before the water gets too high, add up the bribes you take, and no time can be bought by the profits that you make. Before the water gets too high to float the powers that be, or is it someone else's job until the rich are refugees? Before the water gets too high, before the water gets too high, before the water gets too high, before the water gets too high.
And we are back. I'm chatting with Aaron Van Singen. The book, you absolutely got to get yourselves a copy. The Future is Degrowth, A Guide to a World Beyond Capitalism, a real must read. These are some of the most pressing questions of our time, maybe the most pressing question of our time. And I think it's worth paying attention to all of these debates. And before the break, we were talking about some of the, call it mainstream debates among the liberal class and the right wing fascists, the ascendant far right and so forth. But here on the left, we also have very clear dividing lines on these questions. So, Aaron, I want to ask you if you could sketch out for us how the line gets drawn on the left, the line between what you might call left productivism or Prometheanism or whatever you might want to call it, left productivism, fully automated luxury communism, space gay communism, whatever the memes might say. And then on the other hand, we have what we might call left libertarianism, which I think is much more in the camp of questioning growth, whereas the sort of left productivists don't. So here's the question, Aaron. Can you explain these differences, where they come from, and why this debate on the left is so critical?
Yeah, I think that's a really